Hello and thank you for joining me. In this video I give some introductory information that will help prepare us for a study of the Lord's kingdom parables recorded in Matthew chapter 13. In this video I'm going to read the first 3 verses of Matthew chapter 13 that give us the setting and the circumstances for the Lord delivering these teachings. So here we go. The Bible tells us in Matthew chapter 13 in verse 1, on the same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the sea. This was the Sea of Galilee. And great multitudes were gathered together to him, so that he got into a boat and sat. Now obviously he got into a boat, pushed out a little bit from the land in order to be better seen and heard by his audience. So he got into a boat and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. Verse 3, then he spoke, he communicated many things to them in parables. So in our next lesson we'll talk about parables, what they are and why Jesus used them. So Jesus was in Galilee. He was up on the northern end of the Sea of Galilee, near the city of Capernaum. That was his headquarters city at that time. And this day that we're reading of was one of many days in his ministry, many teaching days in his life. So if you ever wonder what was the Lord's primary activity, well, you do a little bit of studying and you'll find that his primary activity was that of teaching God's people his word. So Jesus placed a premium on teaching of the word. The events of this particular day go back to chapter 12, at least to verse 22. So you go back and read, and there was a lot going on in this day, a very busy day. Now I'm going to give you some fundamental information about the kingdom of God. This will help us immensely. The parables, first of all, of Matthew 13 are kingdom parables. Now what's that mean? Well, they concern the kingdom of God as it operates on earth. The timing that they concern from the Lord's personal ministry up to the rapture event, the Lord's second coming, rapture of his people. Now, read you something here. One writer wrote, I think it's good and helpful. The parables are pictures of the kingdom of heaven as in the earth as it goes forth with risks, happiness, and varying circumstances, and as it comes back with disappointment, trials, harvests, and rewards. There is a mixed response, both bad and good. So I think that's a good summarization of what we will find in our study in these parables. Now, I just want to say, too, we need to understand the kingdom of heaven. You'll come across 2 phrases or descriptions in the New Testament, the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of God. Now, these are not describing 2 different kingdoms. They're describing the same thing. So the natural question, well then, why do we have these 2 different readings? Well, Matthew used kingdom of heaven, and Matthew, we know, wrote primarily for a Jewish audience, and he wrote usually kingdom of heaven out of respect for Jews' sensitivity to using the name of God. So the Jews were very they were very careful with the name of God. They did not want to profane it. So normally, when it became necessary to use that name, they would substitute it. They wouldn't say it, but they would substitute it with a word, for example, like heaven. So when we have the kingdom of heaven, it's the kingdom of God. So keep that in mind. Now, basic requirements for a kingdom. Well, you have to have a king, right? You have to have a king who rules. Second, there has to be a sphere or a domain or a territory over which that king rules. And that sphere or domain over which he rules can consist of subject beings. All right. Now, the kingdom of God, let me say it at this point, the kingdom of God is the rule of God. So hold on to that thought. Now, the Bible speaks of 3 manifestations or dimensions, if you want to call it that, manifestations or dimensions of the kingdom of God. First of all, God is sovereign. He is the king. He is the ruler of the universe. By definition, he is over and he rules all things. So no one votes on this. It is not negotiable. God is who He is. However, though God controls all things, nothing surprises Him. Anything that does happen, it has to cross His desk, shall we say, and He has to let it happen. But understand that not all intelligent beings are willing subjects. Now, overall, He's supreme. He rules over them. They don't do anything He doesn't allow. Satan doesn't do anything God doesn't allow. In fact, Satan cannot exist except God allows him to exist, and God has a purpose for him. He actually fills a purpose of God. But not all beings are willing subjects. But God, that doesn't change the fact that God is supreme. The second manifestation of the kingdom is that Jesus Christ will be physically present on the earth during what we know as His 1,000-year or millennial kingdom. So He will be here, He will be reigning, and the Bible states in a couple of places how that He will rule the nations with a rod of iron, which tells us what? Well, there are going to be people that even then they don't like His rule. They're not willing subjects. Revelation 20 even tells us that after the 1,000 years have expired, we don't know how long afterwards, probably not very long, humanity under the influence and deception of Satan will actually march on the Lord on His headquarters in Jerusalem, and they'll be supernaturally destroyed. The third manifestation of the kingdom is that of which Jesus ordinarily spoke, and it is this: the kingdom is a present reality when and wherever saved people are fully surrendered and obedient to the rule of the King, to the rule of King Jesus. Okay, so some basic information that will help us. Now, let's talk about what the kingdom is not. So this is kind of a second main point. What the kingdom is not, two things. Number one, it is not salvation. Say, how can we know that? Well, let's look at some words that Jesus spoke in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, that's the body of teaching we know as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus addressed His disciples. Now, I bring that up. It's contextually important. No part of the Sermon on the Mount is evangelistic. No part deals with people being saved or people needing to be saved. Right? So that body of teaching is instruction to save people to disciples, and it concerns their service, how they may acceptably serve Jesus the King. But Jesus began the Sermon on the Mount with some very important words. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 3, this is what He said: blessed, or we could say spiritually prosperous, are the poor in spirit, for theirs is. Now, the pronoun in the Greek language, theirs, it is emphatic. Theirs is, present reality, the kingdom of heaven. Okay, well, who are the poor in spirit? The poor in spirit are children of God who come to the point that they see themselves as God does, needy, dependent, and they humble themselves and they come to God for service without conditions or qualifications. In other words, they come to Him depending on Him and fully surrendered to Him. And it would be like coming to Him and, Father, I'm so thankful You saved me, and I'm not worthy of what You've done for me, but I want to serve You. I don't know what You can do with me, but whatever You can do, here I am. And there's nothing, listen, no conditions or qualifications. Lord, there's nothing below me. You can't ask too much of me. Okay? So those are some illustrations of what it is to be poor in spirit. So surrendered to the rule of the King. Now again, the kingdom is, that's present tense, the kingdom is theirs, or it is composed of such as are poor in spirit, and only of such. Now, we extend this out, then we have to understand, because not all eternally saved people are poor in spirit, we reason that the kingdom of God is not salvation. So I'm not going to say what percentage at any time of saved people are not in the kingdom or not poor in spirit, but no doubt that percentage is very high, and many children of God simply are doing their own thing. Some may be very religious, but you understand they're doing their own thing. They're not, maybe we could say some are trying to serve the Lord according to the way they think, or they want to serve Him, rather than being yielded to Him and serving Him according to the instructions that He has given. So not all eternally saved people are in the kingdom. We understand also believers go in and out of the kingdom as it operates on earth. And this is simply because things like surrender and commitment, they don't stay done, do they? Commitment and surrender, they ebb and flow. Even for those who do make a commitment and a surrender, we find in our lives, a child of God will find in his life that he has to re-surrender and recommit himself many times in his life. So the kingdom is not salvation. Second thing, the kingdom is not heaven. On another occasion, Jesus said to his disciples, now this is Matthew chapter 18 and verse 3, they were fussing about, who was the preeminent, who was the top dog in the kingdom. And so they asked Jesus, who's the greatest in the kingdom? And this is what he said. He took a little child, set that child on his lap, and he said to his disciples, saved disciples now, he said, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted, talking to saved people, unless you are converted and become as little children, humble, unpretentious, Jesus said you will by no means, in strong language, we would say absolutely no way, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, again, that's Matthew 18:3. So Jesus was speaking to his disciples. He was speaking to eternally saved men, and we reason from this. Now, if heaven, as we believe, is the assured destiny of every child of God, every believer, and it is, then the kingdom cannot be heaven. So Jesus could not have been saying to these men, look, unless you are converted and become as little children, you're not going to be in heaven. He could not have been saying that to them. So the kingdom is not heaven. All right, then that brings us to a third main point in the lesson, what the kingdom is, as Jesus normally spoke of it. The kingdom is the spiritual rule of God accepted in the hearts of believers. Now, there was an occasion when some Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus, and they wanted to know, when is the kingdom coming? And so this is Luke chapter 17. Jesus took the time to teach them, and he made a remarkable statement to them in Luke chapter 17 and verse 21. He said, look, the kingdom of God is within you. It is within you. Well, what did Jesus mean? He meant that is something internal, and it involves a decision an individual child of God makes. So one writer wrote this, in Jesus' view, the kingdom of God was the spiritual rule of God in the hearts of his subjects. And so that's a good way to think of it. By the way, my teaching notes here are available to anyone who wants them. And so I'll make sure that there's a way on my YouTube home page to an email address to get in touch with me. And so I'll be glad to send those to you if you request them. All right. The kingdom involves the will and work of God carried out on earth by kingdom subjects, by his people. Jesus taught his disciples to pray. Now, going back to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus taught in the model prayer. That's what we're looking at. The model prayer. He taught his disciples to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as or just as it is in heaven. That's Matthew 6:10. And just understand the second part of this verse explains the first part. So your kingdom come is described or explained by when your will is done on earth just as it is in heaven. So the kingdom of God comes, or it is present on earth when God's will is done just exactly as it is done in heaven. Well, that begs the question, how is God's will done in heaven? Well, it is done with unquestioning obedience. How about that? It is carried out fully. All right, so that's how God's will is done in heaven. Now, regarding who's going to do it, if it's going to be done on earth, who is going to do it? Well, obviously, it's going to be done by God's children. Believers, here's a statement, and we're coming down to the end of this lesson. Believers, children of God, become participants in the kingdom as a result of an informed decision to make Jesus the King or the Lord of their lives. So the point I want to get across here is one does not just kind of stumble into the kingdom. It's really, there's an equivalency here with discipleship. One doesn't wake up, a child of God doesn't wake up one morning and say, oh, I feel like I'm a disciple now. No. Same thing, kingdom. You don't just kind of stumble into that, but rather it requires an informed decision. Maybe as we say or sing, I have decided to follow Jesus, no turning back, no turning back. Obviously, we're talking about a decision that has been preceded by the Lord's call, not an audible call, but a desire or an awareness the Lord brings to his child's mind that the Lord wants him or her to make a full commitment of their life to him. So you got a call, there's prayer, there's soul searching, and then coming to that point, yes, Lord, here I am, and I'm going to yield myself to you. Okay, so it brings us down to this point. Kingdom teaching concerns the lives and service of believers. It is relevant particularly to those believers who are interested in serving the Lord with their lives. Now, I'm going to say something, and I really want to drive this point home. The kingdom parables are not primarily evangelistic. That is, they do not deal primarily with unsaved sinners' need to be saved. Correct interpretation of these teachings of Jesus requires one to remove from his mind the subjects of evangelism and eternal salvation. So these teachings are not about, some people being lost and some people being saved. It's not about that. The teachings are applicable to saved people. And I end by saying that failure to eliminate evangelism and eternal salvation from these teachings, it's going to result in confusion, not going to understand the parables, and it will also result in irrelevant application. So these are some very important things. And that's going to wrap up this lesson. I hope that you find these things helpful. As I said, the next lesson we're going to talk about parables and why Jesus used them. So think about these things, pray about these things, and look forward to you joining me in subsequent videos. I guess I'll say the YouTube thing too. If you like this video, hit the like button. That would be helpful. And please subscribe if you're not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. That would be helpful as well. So there you go. Thank you for joining me. I wish you a blessed day or night or evening, whatever it is in your case. And God bless you, and hope to see you next time. Take care.